In 1999, in a small house in Rhode Island, workers found something shocking under the floorboards. A barrel. Inside, the body of a woman who had disappeared 30 years earlier. Her name was Raina Marroquin. She was gone, vanished from the world, and no one knew what had happened. Until now. The barrel looked ordinary, but it held a terrible secret. And the strangest part? One small mistake, something so simple, was what finally gave the truth away. Imagine living your whole life hiding a crime, thinking no one would ever find out. And then, in a single moment, everything falls apart. And just to be clear, this isn't a story invented by or made up for entertainment. This is real. A true crime. If you want to hear the rest of this chilling story, make sure to hit subscribe, because what comes next will send shivers down your spine. By the way, where are you listening from? Let us know in the comments. Welcome to Caseborne. Raina was a young Salvadoran woman, just 27 years old, living in the United States in the late 1960s. She was pregnant, expecting her first child, full of dreams and hope for the future. Life in those years wasn't easy, but she worked hard and looked forward to building a family. She had friends, neighbors, and people who cared about her. On the surface, everything seemed normal. But life has a way of hiding shadows behind even the brightest smiles. At that time, the United States was a country of contrasts, opportunity, and danger side by side. Raina was chasing her dreams, unaware that a man in her life, someone appearing trustworthy and respectable, harbored a dark secret. He was a businessman, a man others would never suspect. Yet behind closed doors, the path he would set for Raina would lead to tragedy. It's hard not to feel a chill when you think about it. The calm of daily life, the laughter, and then the moment everything changes. One wrong choice, one hidden truth, and it all comes crashing down. And that's exactly what happened. Raina's story is not just about disappearance. It's about deception, danger, and a secret so dark that it remained hidden for 30 years, until a single mistake brought it all to light. Now let me tell you about the last days of Raina Marroquin and how she vanished without a trace. It was January 1969. Raina, heavily pregnant, was going about her daily life, visiting friends, running errands, and preparing for the baby's arrival. On the surface, everything seemed ordinary. But then, something changed. She stopped showing up where she was expected. Small delays turned into days without word. Neighbors noticed her absence. Some remembered seeing her talk to a man that seemed friendly enough, harmless even. But no one knew the meaning of that encounter at the time. It would only make sense much later, when the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Her family grew worried. Calls went unanswered. And when she didn't return home, fear started to replace hope. Police were called, and an investigation began. Officers checked the usual places: friends' houses, hospitals, local clinics. Yet every lead went cold. Theories circulated. Had she run away? Was it an accident? But nothing fit. Every clue seemed to vanish into thin air, as if Raina herself had been swallowed by the city. No one suspected the dark truth lurking behind a man who appeared ordinary. No one knew that this disappearance was only the beginning, the start of a mystery that would remain unsolved for 30 years. Now let me explain how Raina Marroquin's fate was finally uncovered 30 years after she vanished. It was September 1999 in Jericho, Rhode Island. Workers inspecting an old house stumbled upon something unusual beneath the floorboards: a barrel. At first, it seemed like ordinary storage, but curiosity led them to take a closer look. Inside, the unimaginable awaited. The barrel contained the body of Raina Marroquin. She had been gone for decades, yet here she was, silent and still. The discovery was shocking. Not only had she vanished, but her story had been hidden away, waiting to resurface. Raina's body showed signs of a violent and a severe trauma to the head. Alongside her lay her unborn child, a stark reminder of the life that was stolen. And yet, despite the horror, there was a strange stillness, a haunting calm that contrasted sharply with the chaos of the discovery. This is where Howard Elkins enters the story. A man respected in the community, a businessman with a seemingly ordinary life. No one would have suspected him. Yet his connection to Raina would soon become the focus of every investigation. The man who appeared so normal held a secret that would shock everyone once revealed. It's hard not to feel the weight of the decades, the silence that hid the truth, and the shock that must have hit those first on the scene. Now let me tell you how one small mistake would unravel a secret hidden for decades. In September 1999, when the barrel was opened, investigators were confronted with more than a body. The objects inside began to tell a hidden story. Tiny polystyrene beads were scattered across the barrel's interior. A small medallion glimmered faintly in the dim light, and a worn address book rested against the side. At first glance, these items seemed ordinary, even trivial. But detectives knew that small details often held the key to unraveling a mystery. The address book drew their attention. Pages filled with names and numbers, and one entry stood out, linking directly to Howard Elkins. Elkins was a man who seemed ordinary, respected in the community, a businessman with a spotless reputation. Yet now, the objects connected him to a terrible secret. Investigators retraced every name and phone number in the book. Patterns began to emerge, showing contacts and movements that aligned with Raina's disappearance. The medallion had been seen in photographs Raina had carried. Its presence confirmed a direct link between her and the suspect. The beads, initially thought decorative, were actually part of Elkins' method to try to make the barrel less noticeable. Every object became evidence. The tension among the detectives grew. They realized they were closing in on someone who had hidden a crime for 30 years. Each discovery added pressure. One misstep from the investigators or one careless action by Elkins could change everything. Elkins' outwardly normal life began to crumble under the weight of the evidence. The police could see the walls around his secret starting to break. The small objects in that barrel, so easily overlooked, were now exposing the truth. They spoke louder than words, louder than decades of silence. Detectives felt the weight of decades pressing down. A life once hidden in shadows was now revealed piece by piece. Every bead, every note, every trinket told a story Elkins had hoped would stay buried forever. But it hadn't, and through it all, there was a chilling realization. One tiny mistake, unnoticed for decades, had finally brought the past into the light. It's terrifying to think how such small details can destroy a life built on lies, and yet here they were, speaking louder than any confession could. Now let me explain who Howard Elkins really was, and why he became the man behind one of the most chilling crimes in Rhode Island history. Howard Elkins was known to many as a respectable businessman. He owned a small construction company, attended local events, and maintained a carefully curated image of normalcy. People trusted him. Neighbors would describe him as polite, professional, and even generous. On the surface, he had no obvious enemies, and his life seemed ordinary. Yet behind the public persona, there were signs only a careful observer might notice. Elkins was meticulous, controlling, and intensely private. His personal life was largely hidden from anyone outside his close circle. Friends recalled that he rarely talked about Raina Marroquin after her disappearance. Conversations would shift, and he seemed uneasy when her name came up. Psychologists later noted that men like Elkins often exhibit traits of compartmentalization. They maintain a perfect exterior while hiding a deep inner darkness. Elkins' relationship with Raina was complex. She was young, trusting, and vulnerable. Her pregnancy introduced stakes he was unprepared to handle openly. Some investigators theorized that jealousy played a role. Perhaps Elkins felt threatened by Reyna's independence, or feared losing control over a situation he had started, but could no longer manage. Others suggested it was fear of exposure. The pregnancy, if revealed, could have ruined his reputation and business. In his mind, eliminating the problem may have seemed like the only solution. Social expectations of the 1960s also mattered. A scandal involving a pregnant young woman outside marriage could destroy a man's standing in the community. Elkins, aware of this, may have felt cornered. Family dynamics might have contributed. Friends described him as someone who needed to be in control, who prided himself on appearances and the respect of peers. Losing that control was unacceptable to him. Elkins' planning of the crime indicated premeditation. The use of the barrel, hidden beneath the house, demonstrated careful thought and the belief that he could outsmart investigators indefinitely. His psychological profile suggested a mix of narcissism and obsessive control. To him, the ends justified the means, and moral boundaries were flexible when they threatened his life or image. Neighbors later recalled small details. Elkins rarely socialized with women outside family, and he reacted strongly to perceived slights. These behavioral patterns hinted at underlying insecurities and need for dominance. Investigators noticed how organized he was. Financial records, property management, and personal routines all indicated someone methodical. That same methodical nature enabled him to plan and execute a crime while maintaining an outwardly normal life. The choice to conceal the body in a barrel reflects both pragmatism and cold calculation. He sought a solution that minimized risk and maximized secrecy. It was effective for decades. Yet the psychological strain of living with such a secret is immense. Experts later noted that carrying decades of guilt, stress, and fear can alter behavior subtly, making small mistakes inevitable. Elkins' actions also reveal something about moral dissonance. To him, Reyna was an obstacle to his constructed life. His sense of right and wrong was subordinated to self-preservation. Those who knew him well noticed contradictions. A polite, sociable man in public. A private, secretive individual in private. This duality is common in individuals who commit crimes while maintaining a facade. His motivations may have included both fear and desire. Fear of scandal, fear of losing control, and perhaps a desire to assert ultimate dominance over a situation that challenged him. Elkins' crime was not spontaneous. The concealment, the precautions, the careful planning all point to deliberate decision-making. He weighed options and chose what he believed was the safest path. Yet his understanding of human nature was incomplete. He underestimated time, investigators, and the inevitability of mistakes. That small oversight ultimately led to discovery. In many ways, Elkins' life before the crime offers insight into why it happened. The personality traits he exhibited, control, meticulousness, secrecy, created the conditions for tragedy. His relationships also mattered. Colleagues described him as charming but detached. He could navigate social situations with ease, which helped maintain his public image. Friends and acquaintances rarely saw his darker impulses. He managed to isolate certain aspects of his personality, which allowed him to plan without arousing suspicion. Yet isolation can intensify certain traits. A man alone with secrets may rationalize extreme behavior, convincing himself that his actions are justified. Elkins' ability to compartmentalize helped him succeed in business and hide his crime. But it also made him increasingly fragile psychologically because the stress of living a lie accumulates over time. His methodical nature extended to his environment. The house, the barrel, the placement of objects all indicated someone who considered details deeply and expected the plan to hold indefinitely. Investigators noted that such attention to detail is common among individuals who commit premeditated crimes. The very traits that make them appear normal can also make them extremely dangerous. Elkin's behavior after Raina's disappearance remained consistent with someone hiding guilt. He avoided conversations, limited interactions, and projected calm while internally managing fear. Social norms and personal ego likely reinforced his choices. Admitting the crime would have destroyed his reputation, his business, and possibly his sense of self-worth. His psychological profile fits patterns seen in long-term offenders who maintain public respectability. They are organized, intelligent, socially adept, yet capable of extreme moral transgressions. Ultimately, the combination of fear, control, ego, and opportunity created a perfect storm. Elkins saw a solution to a problem that, tragically, involved ending a life. It's chilling to consider how someone could function in everyday society while hiding such darkness. Yet Elkins did successfully for decades. The story of his personality and motives highlights a terrifying reality. Appearances can be deceiving. People who seem ordinary may conceal extraordinary secrets. Experts suggest that understanding motives in cases like this involves both psychology and social context. Fear, desire for control, and societal pressures all intertwine. Elkin's crime was the result of rational thought, distorted morality, and situational pressure. He calculated risk and acted to protect his constructed life. His planning demonstrates that the line between respectability and criminality can be thin, maintained only by secrecy and social masking. Even as decades passed, the stress of concealment likely affected him, subtly shaping behaviors and relationships, and making eventual mistakes almost inevitable. And yet, through all the darkness, it's impossible not to notice the complexity of the man. Elkins was methodical, intelligent, and outwardly normal, but capable of horrific acts when pushed by fear and self-interest. The psychology of such crimes teaches us about the duality of human nature. Elkin's life shows how social respectability can coexist with deeply hidden immorality. Every choice, every action, and every precaution he took reflects a mind both cunning and fragile, aware of the stakes, yet convinced of control. It's a disturbing lesson. Someone can live among us, seem ordinary, and yet harbor intentions that are deadly, carefully calculated, and hidden from view. Howard Elkin's profile explains how this crime could occur and remain concealed for so long. His personality, combined with circumstance, created the conditions for tragedy. And it's here, in these layers of control, fear, and secrecy, that we begin to understand why Raina Marroquin's life was cut short and why the truth took so long to emerge. Now let me explain the tense final moments leading to Howard Elkin's death and the unraveling of his decades-long secret. After the barrel was discovered and the evidence linked to him, the police began the painstaking process of locating Elkins. Every lead was checked and every connection scrutinized. Officers approached cautiously. They knew the man they were after had lived in secrecy for 30 years and could be unpredictable. Elkin's usual routines became the focus. Surveillance and stackouts were organized to track his movements without alerting him. Neighbors noticed unusual activity around his house. Cars parked at odd hours, police quietly monitoring. But to outsiders, nothing seemed amiss. When Elkins was finally spotted, tension soared. The authorities attempted to approach him calmly, hoping to convince him to come in voluntarily. Elkins remained composed on the surface, but his eyes betrayed a growing sense of unease. He knew the walls were closing in. Conversations over the phone and in person revealed nothing. He deflected questions, maintained a polite demeanor, and kept his distance. The police faced a dilemma: force a confrontation and risk violence, or wait and hope he would cooperate. Time was critical. The evidence was strong, but they had to tread carefully. Days passed. Every plan to interview him was postponed due to his unpredictability. Each delay increased the psychological pressure on both sides. Meanwhile, forensic evidence continued to mount. The address book, medallion, and beads were undeniable connections to Reyna. Elkin's world was collapsing quietly around him. The detectives reflected on the stakes. Here was a man who had hidden a murder for decades. Now, he was finally cornered by the truth he had evaded for so long. Elkin's behavior grew erratic. Friends and acquaintances noticed changes in routine, nervous movements, and uncharacteristic withdrawal from public life. On the day of the confrontation, the police followed his usual route. He drove slowly, seemingly unaware of the surveillance trailing him. Officers prepared to intercept him near a neighbor's driveway, a quiet suburban street that would normally be calm. Elkins parked his car in the neighbor's driveway. Inside, he seemed momentarily reflective, as if facing the culmination of a life carefully hidden. The officers approached cautiously, maintaining distance. Every step was measured, every word deliberate. Inside the car, Elkins made a decision in a brief, silent moment. He pulled out a weapon and ended his life, leaving the officers stunned and the investigation at a dramatic crossroads. The suddenness of his death was shocking. A man who had concealed a terrible secret for decades was now gone, leaving questions unanswered. Police examined the scene. The car, the position of his body, and the surrounding evidence provided clues, but no living suspect remained to explain motives directly. The community was in disbelief. How could a man so ordinary, so integrated, hide such darkness, and then end his life rather than face accountability? Investigators reflected on timing. What if the evidence had been discovered a day earlier, or a day later? Could the confrontation have ended differently? DNA tests and forensic analysis confirmed the link between Elkins and Reyna. The evidence was irrefutable, but the man who committed the crime would never speak. The tension for the police was immense. They had anticipated resistance, but not such an abrupt conclusion to the pursuit. Officers now had to piece together the final moments posthumously. The sequence of his actions provided a window into his mind in those last minutes. Elkin's suicide also forced investigators to consider the psychological weight of living a lie for decades. The stress, fear, and anticipation may have contributed to his final choice. Friends and neighbors struggled to reconcile the image they had of him with the reality revealed after his death. Ordinary, polite, trusted, and yet capable of murder. The investigation continued, documenting every connection, motive, and subtle behavior. The absence of a living suspect meant forensic evidence became even more critical. Speculation arose about what might have happened if the confrontation had gone differently. Could he have confessed? Would justice have been more satisfying for the family? The officers involved in the case carried the tension with them. Months of planning, surveillance, and psychological anticipation had culminated in an unanticipated outcome. Yet even in his death, Elkins revealed truths that had been hidden for 30 years. The evidence, the small mistakes, the careful investigation, all brought clarity despite the tragic end. Community members and investigators alike reflected on the fragility of perception. Someone so ordinary could harbor such profound secrets. Every object, every clue that led to him now took on heightened significance. The barrel, the beads, the medallion, all were silent witnesses to decades of deception. Forensic teams meticulously documented the vehicle, the weapon, and his actions, reconstructing the final moments to understand the psychology behind the decision. The situation forced police to balance procedural respect with emotional impact. They had caught their man, in a way, but the man would never answer for his actions. Thoughts lingered on timing and consequence. If one detail had differed the discovery of a clue, a patrol route Elkins might have survived or confessed, altering history entirely. His suicide underscored the intense pressure that comes from living a double life. The psychological toll of secrecy, fear, and guilt can manifest in the most extreme ways. Even without a confession, the forensic trail was strong. DNA, objects, and meticulous record-keeping confirmed his guilt beyond doubt. Yet the story remained haunting. The man who walked among neighbors, smiling, conducting business, and appearing normal, was revealed posthumously as a murderer. Investigators wondered about the human psyche. How much can a person compartmentalize? How long can guilt and fear be carried before a breaking point arrives? Howard Elkin's death forced everyone to reflect on timing, consequence, and inevitability. One day earlier or later might have changed the final outcome dramatically. The case became a lesson in persistence, forensic precision, and the subtle cracks that appear when a secret is carried too long. It also highlighted the fragile boundary between public respectability and hidden immorality. Elkins embodied both in equal measure. Even decades later, the story provokes chills. The juxtaposition of ordinary life and horrific crime is both fascinating and deeply unsettling. And you can't help but wonder, what if the truth had been discovered just a day earlier? Or a day later? How different would everything have been? The final chapters of the investigation cemented the legacy of the case, a reminder that deception can only last so long, and that small mistakes eventually always surface. Now let me explain the broader lessons from this case, and why one small mistake can change everything. The disappearance of Raina Marroquin in 1969 set in motion a decades-long mystery. At first, it seemed like a case that would fade into obscurity. For years, her family and friends lived with uncertainty. The trail was cold, the leads thin, and the community unaware of the darkness lurking nearby. Then, 30 years later, the barrel was discovered. A shocking find that instantly reignited the investigation and brought renewed hope for closure. Inside, the object's polystyrene beads, a small medallion, and an address book became keys to unraveling a decades-old secret. The police used these clues methodically. Each name and number was cross-checked, each connection carefully analyzed. Small details overlooked for decades suddenly held immense weight. Howard Elkins, a man respected and seemingly ordinary, emerged as the suspect. His life, carefully curated, began to unravel under the scrutiny of evidence. The tension in the investigation was palpable. Officers knew Elkins was intelligent, meticulous, and aware that the walls were closing in. Every day, every step of the surveillance was calculated. They had to ensure he remained unaware while gathering irrefutable proof. Then came the final confrontation. Elkins' suicide inside a neighbor's car shocked both the police and the community, leaving many questions unanswered. Yet the forensic evidence, DNA, objects from the barrel, and detailed documentation confirmed his guilt beyond doubt. The truth was now undeniable. This case highlights a profound lesson. Small mistakes, unnoticed for decades, can unravel even the most carefully constructed lies. In a way, justice has a persistence of its own. Time cannot be cheated indefinitely, and secrets rarely remain hidden forever. Looking globally, similar cases have unfolded in other countries. People who seemed ordinary were revealed posthumously or through forensic breakthroughs to have committed terrible crimes. For example, in Japan, the case of Tsutomu Miyazaki, a man whose ordinary appearance concealed horrific acts, demonstrates the same chilling duality. In Europe, cases like that of Robert Black in the UK show how meticulous planning and decades of secrecy can mask crimes. Yet forensic and investigative persistence eventually expose the truth. Even in South America, authorities have discovered individuals living normal lives who had committed serious offenses years prior, often revealed through small, overlooked clues. The lesson transcends geography. No matter where a crime occurs, careful investigation and attention to detail can eventually bring justice. The Raina Marroquin case also illustrates the psychological weight of guilt and secrecy. Elkins lived decades under the shadow of his actions, and the pressure ultimately contributed to his final, tragic choice. For investigators, the case underscores the importance of patience, thoroughness, and methodical work. Every object, every note, every overlooked detail can become pivotal. For families and communities, it is a reminder that closure is possible, even after decades, and that persistence matters. The objects in the barrel, seemingly insignificant, became symbols of truth. Each bead, each number, each medallion carried decades of hidden stories. It also emphasizes how ordinary appearances can be deceiving. People who seem trustworthy and integrated into society may conceal unimaginable secrets. The persistence of law enforcement, combined with advances in forensic science, allowed a case cold for decades to finally reach resolution. And yet, the tragedy remains. Raina's life was cut short, and the ultimate resolution, Elkin's death, denied a courtroom confession. Still, justice found its way through evidence. DNA confirmed the link, forensic analysis reconstructed the events, and investigative persistence exposed the long-hidden crime. The case invites reflection on morality and human psychology. How can a person live for decades hiding a life-altering crime while maintaining a public facade? It raises questions about ego, control, fear, and the rationalizations people make to protect their image at the cost of others' lives. Across history and continents, the same patterns appear. Individuals with traits of meticulous control, compartmentalization, and social adaptability can conceal crimes for years. Yet eventually, time, human error, or investigative diligence exposes the truth. One small oversight, a tiny clue, a misstep, and the hidden becomes visible. Raina's story is a stark reminder that no secret is truly permanent. Even decades later, justice can prevail if persistence and attention to detail are applied. The story also underscores the weight of human choice. Each decision, from the concealment to the eventual mistakes, has consequences that ripple across time. For those following the case, it is impossible not to feel a chill. A life hidden, secrets maintained, and finally, the revealing power of forensic science. It's a reflection on timing, chance, and the inevitability of truth. What if a clue had been discovered a day later, or a day earlier? How would the outcome differ? Globally, this lesson echoes. From Europe to Asia to the Americas, the smallest errors often expose the most deeply buried crimes. For law enforcement, it is a lesson in diligence. For society, it is a lesson in vigilance. And for us, as observers, it is a lesson in humility and reflection. Every piece of evidence, every investigative technique, every patient step contributed to resolving a decades-old mystery. The Raina Marroquin case serves as a template for understanding crime, psychology, and justice across generations and borders. It also forces a personal reflection. How would any of us react if faced with a secret so dark, so long hidden? Would we maintain the facade or confess? It's a haunting question, one that lingers as we consider the lives affected, the choices made, and the persistence of the truth. Cases like this remind us that truth, patience, and meticulous work can pierce decades of deception. Justice, in its own time, has a remarkable resilience. Even after 30 years, after mistakes, misdirections, and silence, the story reached resolution, leaving lessons for investigators, psychologists, and society. The objects in the barrel once ignored serve as a powerful metaphor. Small details can topple entire facades, reveal hidden truths, and bring long-delayed justice. As we reflect, the story asks a personal question. What would you do if a secret like this was revealed? How would it change your life, your choices, your conscience? Across countries, decades, and cultures, the lesson remains the same. Secrecy has limits, errors are inevitable, and truth finds a way. Persistence in investigation, combined with careful attention to detail, can uncover crimes even after decades, proving that no act, no matter how hidden, is beyond reach. It also illustrates the delicate balance between human error and investigative skill. A single misstep can lead to discovery, as seen in Elkin's fatal mistake. Globally, the parallels are chilling. Crimes hidden in plain sight have been solved in Japan, Europe, South America, and the United States, often due to tiny overlooked clues. The psychological dimension cannot be overstated. Living with guilt and secrecy takes a toll that can manifest in unpredictable ways, sometimes culminating in tragic outcomes. Yet despite the tragedy, there is closure. Evidence confirms the crime, and although the perpetrator cannot face a courtroom, justice is served through truth and documentation. Raina's story continues to resonate, reminding us of the human capacity for both deception and persistence, the fragility of appearances, and the endurance of investigative work. It's impossible not to feel both awe and fear when considering how close ordinary life can brush against extraordinary darkness. The Raina Marroquin case, though resolved, leaves questions lingering. Timing, choices, and human error intertwine to create an outcome both tragic and illuminating. Every investigator, every forensic expert, every small clue played a role. Each contributed to piercing decades of concealment and secrecy. The case exemplifies the profound lesson that even the smallest mistakes carry immense consequences, and that justice, while patient, is relentless. Across the world, similar cases remind us that the truth often waits quietly for those willing to seek it and for time to reveal the smallest oversight. And so, we are left with the chilling reality. One person's hidden crime can persist for decades, yet the persistence of evidence and the diligence of justice cannot be denied. What would you do if a secret this dark were revealed? How would you face it? How would the world see you? This is the enduring lesson of the Raina Marroquin case. Small mistakes matter, secrets rarely stay hidden, and justice eventually prevails. If you think this was intense, the next cases we'll explore go even deeper into the shadows of human nature. We'll uncover more crimes that defy belief, show how ordinary appearances can mask extraordinary evil, and reveal secrets long hidden. So if you want to continue exploring true crime stories that will make your spine tingle, now is the time to subscribe. Hit the bell, join our community, and don't miss a single revelation that will unfold in the coming weeks. And just out of curiosity, where are you listening from? Which country follows these chilling tales with us tonight? Share in the comments, because the reach of these stories is global, and your perspective adds to the discussion. Remember, these aren't tales from a book or the imagination of an eye. This is real life, real crime, and real consequences. Stay with us, because the next chapters will test your perception of trust, secrecy, and the darkness that can hide behind a smile.